welcome back to Based in Reality. So we're still on the Who Are Our Enemies series. I think this is episode 9 in that series. So the last one that we did was about distraction. Distraction leads to detraction. So that was just sort of a clarion call to sober-minded living, sober-mindedness, as we pay attention to the movements that are going on around the world, everywhere from the Silk Road Initiative targeted countries to the Western countries, okay? EU, Canada, and our US. And so I kind of correlated sober-mindedness to, avoiding being distracted so that we can really be present with what is happening all around us and decide what we want our culture to be in our community. So, episode 9 would be today, episode 9. And today we're going to talk about the enemy being the network behind illegal immigration. So thankfully we know that our border is way more under control. We're still narrowing down all the subterranean tunnels that lead from border towns into the corresponding neighboring U.S. town. We know that there are tunnels that go from city to city, city on the Mexico side to a city on the U.S. side. So we're still working on that because we know that drugs and criminal element and migrants, children as well, can be trafficked all along those tunnels. So that's still, I believe, an effort that is occurring. But above ground, things are much more under control, and so we're certainly very grateful for that. But what the light has shown is that we have a number of networks here that are syndicated crimes. So these are Chinese nationals that have come into the country illegally and brought in other Chinese nationals. Same thing with South American folk. They have come in illegally and they employ more migrants. So we have a scenario where we have illegals employing illegals. So these are enterprises that avoid taxation, that avoid correct pay, that avoid a living that a person could actually, have a decent life at. So what happens in these situations is that boarding homes and dorms are where these illegal worker bees are living. There might be 8 people to a lower income house, so a smaller house will have like 8 people living in it, and they are working for an illegal enterprise, okay? But we also have literally office buildings that have been turned into like barracks. So we have people living in barracks who work for illegal Chinese organizations in our country. Just to share with you briefly to that point, there are over 300 marijuana grow farms. There's about 250, I believe, just in Maine alone, just in little old Maine. Okay, but all throughout the U.S., there are many, 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 many grow farms that have been created through nefarious legal transactions, but the people that are running it are illegals from China. They employ human beings that they have trafficked in to work the grow farm. These people, again, are not paid very well. We just saw a bust in California not 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, whatever it was, where you had kids that were 16 and even younger, I think, that were working, that were being paid like slave wages. Okay, that's human trafficking. Working in an enterprise that is not managing to comply with our laws. That was a California case there. That was owned by a legal American citizen in that case. But I'm referring to illegally run, illegals are running all these farms. But the farm may be in the name of an American, do you see? And that's what was going on in California. So working the system, things are done correctly on the surface regarding paperwork, but they purchase, bribe, financially incentivize U.S. officials to handle the paperwork, U.S. attorneys, U.S. local officials, and state level officials to handle the paperwork. This is an enemy to the United States of America. The network that is conducting the movement of these people up through our southern border, who are these people? Well, we know that Soros, the billionaire, and his ilk are the funders of those mass migrations that we saw coming up through Central and South America into Mexico and then beyond to our border. We know from a number of expose articles, it was nothing hidden. There was no secret, to that. But now we understand that it's not just Soros and his son, but they have networked with many other billionaires. And this group of people are funders to bring in unskilled labor, criminal element, people formerly in jails, people formerly in insane asylums to come up into our country. And, this needs to be investigated, and there needs to be consequence. We need to see incarceration of these characters. That's something I haven't seen, right? These issues have been in the forefront since before 2.0 Trump, but I haven't seen any incarceration happen. We need heavy financial penalties. We need criminal prosecution and incarceration of the funders, of the orchestrators behind the invasion into our country. Where are those arrests? I know that the Department of Justice is doing great work. I know that they are busting left, right, and center the middleman and sometimes the little guy. And that all needs to happen. And my hat is off to the DOJ and Pam Bondi and Kash Patel of the FBI. My hat is off. I'm so grateful for their work. But certainly, they know that it's the head of the snake that needs to be cut off. And I know that they are busy doing this great work, and I have nothing negative to say about the work that's been done at all. But I'm saying that it is the heads of these snakes that must be decapitated. And so we have this billionaire group. That's one. Then we have U.S. corporations that are absolutely in concert with this whole illegal movement of people into the United States because they are financially benefited. We had the Hyundai Motors bust in Georgia shortly there ago, a couple of weeks ago. Many people were here illegally from South Korea. This is what I'm talking about. Massive brands. We know that Amazon has been hiring many, many illegal people. Hyundai, Costco has been busted many times, Home Depot. So we've got huge, well-known brands, well-known American companies that instead of embracing our American ethics, which would be to employ U.S. citizens, to give citizens jobs, they are bypassing that and illegally hiring people who are here illegally, people who have broken the law. And this is a definite unstabilizing factor for our country. And I want to give you a thought. When you think about all those grow farms that I mentioned, that product goes to all the vape shops, right? And however other many independent providers of marijuana. But we've got your licensed dispensaries, you've got your vape shops, you've got independent sellers. I don't know much about that at all, but just consider this. how many agro-terrorism arrests were done this summer, just in Michigan alone, the Chinese nationals that were students here at a university. The students here on a student visa were bringing in poisons that can be dropped on our crops, dropped in the water supply of our country. Now, just a couple steps away from that thought, to understand that those chemicals, those poisons, the seeds, in that case it was seeds, but it can be chemicals too, those could be used, and they are being used, on the pot plants. So what they do is they use these inappropriate chemicals as pesticides, we'll call it. But then those pesticides remain on the marijuana plants. And then they're brought to market. So why couldn't a Chinese person, or anybody with ill intent toward Americans, put upon these plants something lethal? It could even be something that's slow, with a slow effect that leads to cancer, that leads to various cancers. But it could be something very detrimental in the lung, that gets in the lung. So we know that, we have Chinese syndicates here, not just operating the farms, but operating all kinds of things here illegally. I don't know if you guys can hear my dog. Gosh, I don't want to stop this video. We're just gonna have to suffer through for a minute. Okay, so we got like a barbecue going on, and my dog's like barking at everybody. So obnoxious. So, anyways, we know that the Chinese have been up to no good. They steal our intellectual property. They steal our military secrets. They steal the blueprints and plans of our military technology. There's that. Okay, so now we've got all kinds of Chinese mob situations going on in the country. So it's destabilizing to allow these networks to influence the trafficking of people into the country. Now we know that the top level border down south is under control. We know Canada is just wide open. We're going to have to fix the situation on that border in Canada. That is still virtually wide open. Okay? But the money to pay the traffickers to bring in the migrants is still there. And we're just now scratching the surface. Thank God that USAID is shut down, because that was a direct redistribution of taxpayer funds to go right in through Soros, but it goes right in to these nonprofit organizations, these non-governmental organizations, NGOs, that were just carrying out the plans of the Democrat Party. I mean, I hate to say it, but that's what it is. They are carrying out the plans and the missions and the strategic goals that the left wanted to see happen, including illegal immigration, which saves these corporations a bunch of money, which denies an American a job, which puts these illegal migrants on the dole, on the taxpayer dole, for things like Medicaid, okay, food stamps, energy assistance. Now, we're cleaning that up, right? We're going through the Medicaid rolls. We're going through the food stamp rolls and so on and so forth. So we're getting there. But our American companies need to be held to account. Where is the accountability for the American companies? Where is the accountability for Hyundai, Costco, Amazon? Where is it? Who is being held to account? If we do not hold anyone to an account, then there is no motivation to get right and to be true to our country. These companies need to be true to the Americans. They're sitting in our country, delivering services, providing services or whatnot. If they're here, then Americans get those jobs. So, who is an enemy these networks, including U.S. corporations are part of the enemy problem when they carry out these plans of employing illegal people just to cut the wages. These people don't really benefit that much. I mean, they're in a safer, freer country, that's for sure, so they're helped out that way. But their lifestyle, is, I guess, better than it was at home. But they're definitely being cheated by these companies. I'm just saying the companies need to do better, and those who were caught in this very sad state of affairs in our country right now need to be held to account. People need to be fired, companies need to be paying fines, and people that just absolutely knew at the top of what was going on, there needs to be jail time. 5 years, 10 years, I don't know. But people need to go to jail in our country. Otherwise, we don't really have law and order. All right, so that is it for today's second video today. Man, I'm catching up to what is going on. Okay, so if you have ideas for other episodes, I've got like a list of ideas, but it's kind of short actually. So if you want to see more of this content, feel free to put comments down below of things that you want to chime in on, or things that you disagree on, and you want to, have some dialogue back and forth on that. We can always include that in an episode for sure. So, right, we do believe in free speech. Now, if somebody has a completely different idea than I do, or opinion than I do, tastefully, go ahead and put it in the comments, and I will address it, So, there you go. We can't be afraid to just look at these ideas. We may not agree on them, but we can at least look at them. We can have a dialogue upon them. We may come together a little bit, and we may not. But even if we don't come together, no one should be advocating for violence. No one should celebrate violence, right? Have we not learned anything from the absolute rank rhetoric that we've seen after Charlie Kirk's death? The absolute lack of compassion, rancor, violent rancor in the discourse, and we do not need that. So, you can say to me, whatever you want in the comments. Keep it tasteful. If it's not tasteful, I'm not going to respond to it. But, say whatever you want. Because if you're truly trying to get to the truth, if you're really trying to, look at an idea and decide what you really think about it, then, you shouldn't be murderously enraged. You know what I mean? I've attended a lot of county, local politics meetings where people had viewpoints that were the polar opposite of mine. And, you listen, and then you get up and you say what you need to say. And I have been very vociferous and have been known to be, pretty, out there and very buoyant and outspoken if something was representing a harm, and I'm not going to apologize for that. I've been asked to leave, well, only one time have I been asked to leave a local governmental board meeting because I definitely spoke out of turn when it was not my turn to speak, So, did I call anybody a name? I don't think so. I think I told the board that they were ridiculous, because they were. But that's not like, hate speech. I'm not calling for any kind of, violence or anything like that. So I'm just saying there are going to be times where we hotly disagree. We hotly disagree on something. But that's totally different from the out of control rhetoric that's going on right now. So let's just keep that in mind, that free speech, free speech is crucial to our republic going forward. It's crucial. And yes, free speech has consequences. I was escorted out of the local meeting by very, very professional and kind people, and I, politely left. But even if I hadn't politely left, even if I was vociferous on the way out of the building, that's a consequence of being out of order, right? So even though I do have free speech, if I do get a little rowdy because I think public safety is at risk, and I may do that again, and I may get escorted out again. So, free speech can have, a consequence to it, like the recent firings that people are experiencing. Well, I mean, that's up to the employer. You're not being hauled off to jail for your speech. You're allowed to say whatever you want to say, but an employer may have something to say right back to you. That's why we have these rules, conduct codes, and, rules of conduct that you sign at different places that you might get a job at. They'll have you sign that because they're saying, if you come work for us, this is our expectation. You will not steal from the employer. If you get arrested, you will inform us that you have been arrested. You will not miss an inordinate amount of work. If you violate these terms, it is cause for you being removed from your position. So when people are front facing and they're in the media and then they go on and they celebrate murder, of course the employer can say that that's a violation of their code of ethics or their code of conduct. Do you see a twisting right here? A twisting? You're not being deprived of your First Amendment rights if your employer fires you for celebrating murder. That is not a little thing. Now, you just have to use intelligence. You just have to be aware of what is the boundary of your position. Why are you there? What is your role? So, as I understand with the Jimmy Kimmel separation from employment, he was about to do a show. I believe his last show was going to be just a showdown, lowdown, double down on MAGA being the issue. MAGA's the problem. Right? Let's just blame MAGA for every irritating thing that group of people experience. So anyways, they pulled that show. They didn't air the show because that employer was being, intelligent, realizing that, half of the audience at least, and we know it's more than half. It's every day it's becoming more and more and more than half. It's becoming the majority. Look at all the county. Did Trump not get 90 counties in the U.S.? Yeah. Anyway, so people are kind of swinging back toward the center, and these broadcasting companies know it. And so they know that their audience is not going to appreciate yet another, angry attack on people who share these traditional, patriotic, family first, God first values. But that doesn't mean that those people who've been fired have been denied freedom of speech. No, they've just been denied an audience that does not, correspond to that viewpoint. They haven't figured out who their audience is. These people feel like they're in a safe echo chamber. They're in a safe echo bubble that they can talk in. They don't realize that a lot of the country do not agree with those opinions. They have not yet read the room. It's time to read the room. Okay. All right, y'all. Okay, so this one was basically on criminal networks and the companies that bed them. That is the enemy for this episode, with a slight turn on let's read the room. Liberals who are getting fired, people that are getting their accounts canceled on TikTok and whatnot. Read the room. Think smart. Think smart and act accordingly. Save yourself your job. Okay, take care.